which again, I'm not criticizing. That's a thing
No,
because
I understand that. Yeah.
ultimately, much as everyone wants to say, well, you can go anywhere in the setting and do anything, and the setting can change due to your actions because you're heroes and all the rest of it. The fact is, we never do. The backdrop remains, for the most part, untouched in practice.
So that's an interesting question because in the initial thing I wrote down, there was actually a mechanic to change, depending upon, like, there'd be a roll at the end of every session, and depending on on how the roll went, like, people would either have the tyrannical alien world management, I call them world management, would have either more control, or there would be more rebellion.
Exactly.
Right, depending
Completely
upon
get that.
yeah.
So in that case,
Okay.
you did have a causal factor at work there, and I think
Initially, I
probably
did.
yeah. So, but that's what we're
Mm-hmm.
talking about. We're talking about now.
Okay.
Let's keep that in mind as a significant factor. If
Okay.
the internal ideological changes were to remain wholly internal, or sorry, if we have these internal ideological changes, I have decided that, all your bleating about optimistic and cooperative stuff to make the world a better place by all working together and understanding each other better. I've decided that you are obviously an idiot, and I am going to
Right.
bump myself a little further down the in it for me, myself, and I. And if it
Right.
weren't for bad luck, I'd be in charge of one of those corporations. But I had bad luck, so I have to stick around with people like you.
Right.
So let's say I do that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if your game has that role you were talking about, the meaning of that decision is very different from a game in which you don't have that role that you're talking about.
Interesting.
Right? Because by having a role like that, and I'm only choosing your role as to stick with because of the 1,000 ways it could be done. We're just going to look at that
right.
one.
Sure.
If we have a game that has that capacity for the backdrop, for ripple effects from our situation to hit the backdrop eventually, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so then it's like, oh, look, somebody repainted the backdrop, for the next time, holy crap, look at that, right? And so if you have that, then my decision to be selfish is very different. It's harsher.
Yeah.
Right. Then if,
Yes.
well, we never can really seem to change the backdrop. So my change is just my choice and it's affecting me. So what's the big, right? Whereas here there is, so I'm saying before you say that's an initial design idea and I sort of let that fade away, before we say that, bear in mind that it is actually directly relevant to the personal changes.
Interesting.
It's relevant. It gives them a different meaning if there's a way to kick the backdrop a little.
That makes sense.
Right. So just keep that in mind. I'm not making a recommendation either way, but it's clearly you're going to end up with a decision one way or the other somehow.
Right.
So, so given all that, which was a really long way, I mean, this is just my first. It was both, because we talked about both the change in the characters and situations, and we talked a little bit about the changes, the mechanical kind of changes in attitude. Okay. With all of that stated, when we look at the procedures of play, and I'm pretty sure you can see this coming, I'm going to jump to a much more concrete mechanical feature, which is here I'm kind of going with what you now, sort of pretending you yourself back then, but knowing what you know now. What's the point? You keep talking about rolling and failing and succeeding and, this, we roll and we succeed or fail. And failing means what? Fictionally.
Right. Well, it means narrowly or generally?
Well, it depends on the example that helps you better. At the moment, generally, it might be the harder
Okay.
answer or the
Yeah.
harder specification, the harder question.
So what does failure mean in general? Is let's say in
Failure of
general,
resolution.
right. So in general, it means that the character's intents are not being met. I mean, they're being answered in a negative, and they're getting a condition. They're getting their effectiveness is being degraded. Um, I guess in general terms, yeah.
So what that really kind of
Yeah.
comes down to is that the characters, should we have maximum fail?
Hmm.
And if you have a mitigating, like failure gets you more successes later or gets you bonuses for later, and successes get you penalties for later. Let's say you have that even, but we're going to take the worst case scenario of how that
Right.
could possibly turn out,
Yeah.
whatever that is, right? I sometimes like to ask people this or think about this is in your game that you're playing right now or the game that you're designing and playing, what happens if it all goes south? Worst rolls
Gotcha.
possible. Worst rolls. The worst.
That's a really
All of them.
that's
Just all
a
of them. They
really
all
good
suck. It
question.
all goes bad. And the right. The typical
Yeah.
way, the cynical and unpleasant way to put this is that historically, the effectiveness of single rolls, the impact, the consequence of single rolls, basically there's been an inflation so that each roll does less and less and less and less per unit of play.
Right. I
And so,
understand.
given that, that means that if the game master can retain narration authority, that means that all of the failures will be, if they seem to have gone too far, they will start narrating them less and less and less and less consequentially, and narrating whatever successes occur more and more and more consequentially. And you just rely on statistics. If the failures just keep coming, you just have roll more, 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 and more, waiting for the
Right.
success. So then that success can be basically
Yeah.
an uber critical, and everything's fine. So the manipulation of that is sort of called good GMing in some circles.
I
So
understand.
right.
Yeah. But it makes
So
everything less have less meaning.
yeah, as I say, Jesus is coming.
Yeah.
Look busy. The story is coming sooner or later. Just
Right.
look busy until it does. So
Yeah.
the in this case, though, could we end up with all the
Right.
characters, dead, captured, implanted
Yes.
with alien eggs, etc.? Right?
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
They'd be like you could be put into thought therapy and then come out like just a totally different,
Mm-hmm.
or you could be killed, you could be spaced,
Mm-hmm.
you could be eaten,
Mm-hmm.
right? Any of those things, right?
So,
So,
so in that case, are we thinking in terms of some degree of player character turnover?
um,
And if you don't mind,
yes,
if you
it
don't
has
mind
to
me
be
saying
possible.
this, in the
Yeah,
Expanse, they
right.
all should have been dead by about 2 or 3 episodes in, as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, but they had a whole lot. They had a whole lot of plot armor. That's all I got to say. Yeah.
For sure, for
Mhm.
sure, that's understood. Um, um, yes, they're right because otherwise, it becomes shallow. I think.
So we are talking
Yeah,
about, shall we say, the present. I mean, it's not dystopia unless dystopic things happen. That's part of the
exactly.
picture. Okay.
Right.
Now it's starting to come a little bit together, if you ask me.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, let's go ahead and just keep it's all provisional. I know that. It's
Sure.
all provisional. Let's just kind of keep this in mind. We're making up these characters and we've
Right.
got the situation is framed for them. I mean, they're basically dropped to some extent. I don't know how much the player character's statements or player character sheet statements actually factor into the creation of situations, but however much that is, they're beginning their situations. And given that let's keep both. Let's keep both a fair amount. I mean, it may take a little bit and a bit of bad luck, but there's a certain amount of grim outcomes available for them or people around them that they care about or the circumstances that they were seeking to achieve. not everybody's going to get, not all the characters are probably going to walk out of a scenario, happy. So with that, then we have a chance for whatever it is that they've done. And we don't really know what that role is, and we don't really know what factors into that role, like what gives you like a better chance on this role or a worse chance on this role. But
Okay.
whatever it is, there's some sort of mechanic where we go, are there ripple effects from this situation that go out and like hit the backdrop, right? That
Okay.
either the world management becomes more, their stock goes up, right? Or they're one of the colonies, like, some consortium of asteroids out there basically pulls a rebellion, blows up a world management ship, and, declares the free people out there, or something like that. Who knows?
Hmm.
And
Right.
so and then you have your character's own consequential sense of how I look at things now, given what we've been through. Has it, have I bumped along a certain line, and in what way? Maybe more than one line if you have, an X or something. I don't know. But you end up with sort of a different outlook. Or at least your outlook is, maybe you've even confirmed that your outlook is further along on that line than we had ever imagined, right? So, however it is, but now this is really interesting. What if I have confirmed from my character's point of view, and I'm feeling very good about this in terms of the integrity of how I've played and how my character has done it?
Hmm.
I might not even like it, but I like playing this guy for some reason. And I've
Right.
made him more selfish. I've made him more cynical. I've
Mm.
made him more, no, the world is dark, desperate, and vicious. And the only reason I'm not on top is because those bastards have all the advantages. So I have to fight them just because I'm that stubborn. Okay. But don't
Gotcha.
don't for a moment believe that I'm going to join you in your little hippie Eden that you keep talking about. That's not going to happen.
Right.
Right.
Got
So
it.
that's my point of view. And for my character, I, as the player, might even find that character kind of an asshole. I'm kind of going, God, man, find a, find something, right? But no, he won't. The
Right.
character's glaring back at me and saying no. And I'm going, okay, I kind of like a character that says that to me, and I'm going to keep playing this guy.
Hmm.
So I do this, but then we make the roll,
Okay.
and we did make a difference.
Uh-huh.
I'm liking this game now. I'm liking this game. I like it if it goes the other way, right? I'm playing
Yeah.
the hard bitten veteran of the cyber wars, who's, half his brain is gone, because it's been replaced by this or that. He's bitter, and he's scarred, and he's, sad, and all the rest of it. But that little beating spark of hope, and his new, fire forged surrogate family has come together, and he's feeling it. And so he's like, okay, my hope burns just a little brighter for me. We
Hmm.
can have the better world. We can have the better life. We've just got to
Yeah.
get to
Yeah.
those rebels and see
Yeah.
if they're actually any good. Let's go connect with those rebels,
Yeah.
everybody. You too,
Right.
grumpy guy, right? And so we're gonna do that. But that time, and I'm playing that guy, and I'm like, oh, I'm all about this. I'm
Hmm.
feeling it, right? And we don't make the roll. I'm enjoying this, right? It could,
Okay.
it's, you see what I mean? It's actually got a
Yeah.
little bit of spark to it, of saying, this could actually be, and here I'm going to make enemies out of everybody. This actually could be Firefly that's good. I mean, how am I going to
You
put it?
might want
Everything about Firefly was good. It just wasn't good,
to.
right?
Interesting. Okay.
So the deal with uh it was always about to be good. You see, it's got the John F. Kennedy problem. He was about
Interesting.
to. He would have been great. He was about to. Right. So if only. So anyway, the deal with this image, and as far as I'm concerned, I haven't added anything. I'm only quoting the things that were kicking around in your mind at the time.
Hmm.
Right. I mean, I'm pretty sure I
Yeah.
haven't added any content in this conversation. Right.
Hmm.
I've not contributed anything. I've just tried to isolate those things, right, that you have
Okay.
said, and say, oh,
Hmm.
well, how do those go together?